Hello, world.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello
Hi.
there.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
It's like I've forgotten how to say hello.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Life with Kaka, the show where we chat with producers from all walks of life to learn about their journeys, to take a deep dive into their careers, and to dig into the messy parts of life, the Kaka. I'm your host and producer, Carolina Groppa. This week on the show, we hear from Alana Mayo. She was an executive at Paramount Pictures for many years before becoming head of development and production at Michael B. Jordan's production company, Outlier Society. Real talk, she's been on my radar for quite some time, and when this interview was recorded back in January, it was honestly the highlight of my week. Aside from her being a total boss in the field, you just kind of want to kick it back with her and have drinks at the Sunset Tower. Oh, we were both getting over some sort of weird cold when this was recorded, but don't worry, we're not contagious. She had so much goodness to share, and so I just had to cut this down into 2 parts. So, part 1, we're going to tackle how to be authentic in the age of social media, how to not derive your self-worth from your professional identity, and how she differs from her fiancé, the trailblazing Lena Waithe. Alana's path could not have been more different from mine, and our talk reminded me how each person's journey in this life, especially in entertainment, is so unique. You just never know how the stars are going to align. It reminded me of how I started producing in the first place, which was by just jumping in the deep end of the pool, doggy paddling to the edge every time, and coming up gasping for air, wondering what just happened and how did I get through it? I really adore this woman, and I can't wait to hear what you think and take away from part 1 of our talk. Here is Alana. I find that, when I listen to podcasts, that people tend to gloss over the hard times or the difficult stuff, and that's kind of why I started a podcast. Oftentimes, there is this, especially with social media, this sort of myopic view and perception of what we do, of what the industry is actually like, what the lifestyle is like of somebody who is in this business that isn't a celebrity. And my hope is that I can demystify that a little bit and pull back the curtain and give a voice to the people that rarely are heard from. Yeah.
It's weird. Like this is just a job is what I always say. It's like, it's just a job like any other career and profession that you can have. It's just, a very public job that involves sometimes going to parties or being photographed for magazines or walking red carpets, but it really is just a job. And I would like for more people to think of it as, a real potential career in the same way that you can think about being a dentist or a doctor or a professor or whatever, you might think of, because it's just a job.
It is. But that phenomenon of like the media and the attention and the sort of publicity that goes along with what we do is fascinating, that has to go hand in hand with the work.
It is fascinating. It makes sense from a just a practical standpoint of how do you publicize or market things, but it is culturally very interesting to me how much of this profession is tied to and related to PR, for good and for bad, and some of that, funnily enough, is, I think, more for the purposes of internal industry leverage and power than it even is for connecting to an audience, because there are plenty of people that we're aware of that we think are, hot or important or, sexy for whatever reasons, because they've had really great internal Hollywood PR that I think the audience doesn't really know about or recognize, but it's so ingrained in how this industry functions and how you're able to just get things accomplished. So I think having a healthy relationship to it is important, and understanding that you have to do it. Like, I rejected the notion of having to do any sort of, or having to have
a presence.
It's kind of counterintuitive to just who I am as a person. I like things to happen really organically, and I don't like the notion of projecting something into the world intentionally to try to get a result. But once I realized that you have to do that, you know, you find I think I would like to think I found my own version of it. But it's really challenging, whether you're a person who is comfortable with it or not, to find, I think, the right balance of an authentic portrayal of who you are and understanding that this is just kind of a functional part of doing this job.
Yeah. I mean, there's always that point when authenticity becomes, you know, sponsored #ad. And then it's like, at what point is that considering selling out? And I think, you know, Lena Waithe, who's your fiance, I think she's done an incredible job I've been following her since she was Hillman grad, since before she changed her handle on Instagram. But, you know, just to see how she has taken the power that she's been given and really made her voice her own. I think that is, when used at its best, that's how it looks. I also have a love-hate relationship with it. Then it becomes a full-time job of like, what should I be thinking to say that is authentic and true to my voice? It's just exhausting. And then I don't want to do any of it, you know?
I don't envy you that at all.
Thanks.
Because I think it's impossible to be organic and have to kind of prescribe and plan things like that. I do think it's possible to be authentic though, and still understand that your authenticity has to, you know, be translated through this kind of manufactured product. Like, you think about just brands that we love, like Coca-Cola is always what it is, right? Like super syrupy, delicious carbonated drink, but they understand that they have to figure out how to iterate on that message and release it in the most effective way possible. So whether that's in a bottle or a can and sold with this ad campaign or not, I'm somebody who's just all about progress. So for all of the pitfalls of this kind of social media generation and people not being as focused on the work as they should because they're more focused on, frankly, the marketing of it. Hopefully what comes out of this is a bunch of brilliant marketers, because we need those too. But the positive of social media is it's the kind of democratization of content, which has never existed the way that it does now. There have always been, you know, these real big barriers to entry. You know, the fact that you can like do this podcast in the setting that we're doing it now with a laptop and a couple of microphones, and I don't know what this guy does, but whatever this little box is, a little mixer. So you have like a very lo-fi way of doing this, and you are distributing this globally by putting it on the internet. That's something that wasn't possible 10 years ago. And so the voice that it's given to people who otherwise would not have one, the ability that it's given to people that are even within this industry and aren't, you know, the type of person, or aren't specifically people that have held positions of power and haven't been able to advocate for their own art or their own content. To me, that's so much doper than like the, you know, the kids that want to like post selfies all day. And I'm very curious what this generation, like with the kind of manifestation of an entire generation of young people growing up being able to project versions of themselves into the world and have like demand and audience through social media. Just from a like psychological, sociological perspective, I'm curious what that means 20, 30, 40 years from now. There are people that I think have chosen to take what is really just an incredible bit of technology and moment in our technological evolution and use it as a platform to say something that's meaningful to them, whatever that is. And I think that's really cool.
If people and we can lean into that, because it's definitely here to stay, you know, and there's a whole nother level of it that we can't even foresee yet. That's like, if we knew then what we know now type of thing. I do hope this podcast reaches like that 19-year-old girl, you know, who's kind of like, I don't know, but I think I want to do it.
Totally. I mean, I totally, you know, I think it's cool to have the intention of making something that can reveal a different side of a profession that people don't really understand or know about. You know, a huge question we get, and I'm really kind of bad at social media, and so for me, Instagram, which is the only social media platform that I think I'm really on in any real way. Like for me, Instagram is to look at like puppy videos and like people falling, because I find that to be funny. But a lot of what like if I do ever look at really, Lena will be like, oh, you know, I DM'd you something, and I'll be like, oh, I didn't see it. And I'll look, and I'll have had all of these DMs from people that I didn't answer. And I would say the vast majority of the ones that are people that I don't know are from people that are just like, hey, do you guys have interns at your company? Or, hey, you know, how does one get involved in your company, or how does one find their way to doing what you want to do? Or, you know, the things that really, you know, warm my heart are like, oh, we want to do the thing that you were doing, and it's really helpful to hear about your journey and your path there, because that was I probably had a leg up over most people because my parents worked in the entertainment industry.
Oh, what did they do?
My father was a radio executive who both ran and owned radio stations throughout the country, and my mother worked in entertainment law. And so I knew that it was possible to have a career in entertainment. I just had been exposed to the music side of things, not the film and television side. But the great fortune of going to college in New York and being able to intern while I was in college, and being able to like afford to intern for free because most of them were unpaid. And I remember the moment where I was like, I had started out being like, oh, maybe I'll be an actor. And my mom was like,
no,
way too well, exactly. She was like, one, don't do that. And then she was like, she literally said to me, you know, you're too bossy to take direction, so I don't think that would ever work out for you. And then I was like, maybe I'll be a director. And I remember like trying to make a short film when I was in high school, and my childhood friend Brandon had also made a short film. We were at film camp because I was that kind of a nerd. And I was like, his short film is so good. And I was like, mine is so bad. And so I was like, I don't think that's it. And then when I was in college, I tried to do creative writing. And whenever we had to read our work aloud in like this workshop, everybody else's would be so good and mine would be so bad. And I was like, this is not like, none of these things are the thing that, you know, I think I have a talent or a skill set to do. And I remember interning for Lee Daniels, and he both had a head of development and a producing partner. And I remember the moment where it clicked, where I was like, oh, this is the thing. And then I looked back and I was like, when I was a kid and I was like trying to be in plays, like the thing that I really enjoyed was the organizing of the play and what I would now say is producing of the play. And when, you know, I was in film camp and we would rotate jobs, I did not enjoy making shot lists. I didn't really enjoy working with actors. I didn't really want to like design a shot, think about a frame, think about a lens, like think about, you know, like freaking crossing the line. I did that all the time. My characters were always talking to themselves. And I never, like, that was not of interest to me. But when I got to rotate into producing and producing somebody else's short, that was really cool. And then when I was in creative writing class, I hated reading my own work and I would procrastinate writing my own work. But I loved critiquing other people's stuff and saying like, oh, if you just move this one thing, or maybe if you have this character, think about this, that would just, you know, make your work even better. And so it really is the kind of thing that I don't think a lot of people are aware of, it being a completely legitimate profession. And it's so rewarding if it's something you enjoy doing, because you get to sit inside of the creative process in a really intimate way and help other people who are crazy talented, like you help to facilitate their vision coming to life. And it's not the public I mean, if you're somebody like me, it's perfect because I don't want to be public facing. So it's not a public facing job. It's not a job you do for glory or for awards, but it's so deeply, deeply, deeply rewarding. So I hope also that that 19-year-old girl listens to your podcast and also, you know, looks at this as a legitimate profession, because it's a really cool one.
Yeah, I think that's exactly. I think you nailed it. And I think a lot of people, everybody's path is so different in this business.
But the good thing about producing is that it's as much of just being good with people as it is the practical stuff. I feel like you can learn, you know, like
100%.
How to bond a film, like how to apply for permits. Like these are fairly practical things. And if you're a person who, you know, is good at like figuring things out, I guess that would be the number one skill set of producing, then that stuff you can learn. Being able to have conversations, you know, you have to interact with, as a producer, so many people, and you have to manage the goals and the needs and the wants of so many people, and then also whatever it is, the thing that you're producing, like the holistic vision of whatever that is. If you've meandered for 5 years and you've gotten some life experience and you've had difficult, you know, interactions with people, and you've had failures that you've had to overcome, and you've interacted with various different types of people, and you understand that not everyone can be communicated with the same way. Like, that is as valuable, if not more so, because I feel like a lot of times that's what makes it, particularly in film, and particularly like the types of movies that I've worked on, where you've had to both manage a studio and financier, and then also like a person of note and success as, or I should say people of note and success as filmmakers. Like, you have to have lived. It's like having a relationship, you know, but with like 50 different people.
Exactly.
And I think the more lived life experience you have, the easier it is to do that.
Yeah. I also think, as someone who's come up as a line producer and more through the physical side, really knowing personality types, and when you're crewing up, how those people are all going to get along. You know, not every DP should be working with that production designer. And sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes it's just, you kind of make the best of it. But it's like, who are you going to put on this ship with you to go on this journey? And that, I think, is the finesse of getting the right crew together and creating that magic that I think you can create on set, that in my opinion is 90% of what gets imprinted onto the 100%. Film. It isn't just the actors, it's the crew, it's the energy behind the scenes, it's everybody from the top down, and the tone that they're setting for that set. So for me, when someone can walk on one of my sets and say that the energy here is so positive, like, I've won. For me, that is what I'm after, because everything else is not in your control. It's so true. You can have all of the best actors and all of the best intentions and the best script, and it just doesn't go the way you want it, or tanks in the box office, whatever. So success in that sense shouldn't be like, yes, of course, make the best movie you can. And of course, everybody wants it to be visible and to find success, financial and other means. But can you create an experience that is going to be worthwhile for everybody? I always try to empower anybody, because one, your title today doesn't define who you are, and it doesn't define where you're going. It's just a stepping stone. You know, your PA today could be your boss tomorrow.
Amen.
And it's just about being a good person and communicating with people, empowering people, making them feel heard, making them feel understood in a very high stress situation.
Right.
You know,
well, that, I think,
so it's a lot, but that's the hard part of it.
I couldn't agree with you more. And it's the thing that everybody's doing, whoever you are on set, is also fundamentally a creative thing. So you think about the space that you need to be in to be creative in your regular life, however you're creative. It's much easier to do it when you feel comfortable and you don't feel like you have to worry about everyone, and everything is relaxed, and the appearance is that things are, you know, going really well. Like, I had these great mentors when I worked as a studio executive, and the way most film studios still do it is that the job that you have when you're trying to, you know, like where you're still learning, it's called a junior executive, and you're partnered on every project with a senior executive. I remember talking about movies, you know, after the fact, like years after the fact, that I worked on as a junior executive with the senior executive on the project. And I'd be like, oh yeah, so-and-so actor was like totally cool, it was totally chill. And the senior executive would be like, no, he was a monster. Like, we couldn't get him out of his trailer every day. And like, you know, he didn't know his lines, and he wanted to quit in the set. And I remember thinking like, wow, how amazing that the people that worked on this movie were able to keep that keep it contained, so that I worked on the movie and I had no idea that this stuff was going on. And to me, like, that's really, as you were saying, that's like really the secret sauce of producing, is being able to, because you're always, not only is the results going to be out of your control in many ways, but also, you know, you have 100 plus people working on a set at any given moment in time. You can't micromanage every person. So there's going to be hiccups. Things are going to happen. People are going to be unhappy. People are going to have good days and bad days. But if you can just, on the whole, keep everything, like start everything so that it feels like we're starting on a good foundation, and then keep everything more or less on schedule, more people happy than unhappy, everyone feels taken care of, like, you know, down to the little things. I remember I had another mentor and friend who, you know, always like wouldn't work with this line producer again. And I was like, well, why not? Like, what was the issue? Thinking it was like, oh my God, it went way over budget, or there was, you know, receipts that were missing or something like really big. And she was like, we were shooting in wherever, Boston, I don't know, someplace really cold. And he had no staging area for the extras. And so all of these extras were in this tent with no heaters and no whatever, in the dead of winter in Boston or whatever it is. And I was just like, how could you not have accounted for that? And now this entire group of people is unhappy to be here. And me, as the creative producer on the project, have to now like manage the fact that I have this scene that has 100 extras in it, and I have 100 extras who are pissed off and who are cold and who want to leave. And I was like, oh my God, it can be something that small and that minute that makes the world of difference.
Well, I think it's like when you forget the humanity, that it's like you want to treat a person who's chosen to be a background actor, which is a shitty lifestyle. It's a shitty gig to begin with, right? But people do it, and they're essential to a part of the process, to a piece of the pie. So you forget the humanity of like, these are 100 human beings who are working, and in no other field would that be acceptable. The moment you forget that, to me, is when you're in trouble. And it doesn't matter who anybody is. So if you can infuse a little bit more love and compassion into your sets and into how you deal with people. And it takes someone who can be really, I think, humble to put their needs aside. And that's why I was so hungry to start this podcast, because there's this misconception about what producers are actually like and how they're money hungry, and then the first person to just make all the money, and they don't care about anybody else, and they're just keeping it all to themselves. And it's like, no, those are usually the first people to cut their rates to make a movie or to make a project. It like, you know, it makes me really sad. But of course there's shitty, terrible people, of course, in our industry.
Fields, yeah. I mean, I also think the producer now, and again, it depends on the thing and whatever, so I won't make a gross generalization, but the producer now is also different from what producers historically were. And like, you know, producers and studio executives used to be much closer, if not the same person, you know, like the golden age of Hollywood or whatever. And then I think, you know, in the kind of boon of the 80s and 90s, where everybody was making money hand over fist, the producer was getting, you know, multiple $1 million quotes, and they were the celebrities in their own right, and they had ego, and they had to be taken care of as much as, you know, like the economics of film especially have changed. And Lord knows, non-writing producers on TV, like that was never like a lucrative or sexy job necessarily. I think it's a great job for other reasons, but it was never like the dream job, you know? And so now, it's particularly now, if you're doing it, whatever you're doing it on, there's gotta be some other deeper level of commitment and passion. And like, yeah, there are people that are producing quotes that are huge, and, you know, they're getting rich off of things that they're making too. But I feel like particularly now, and this is, I think, true of anything in film and TV, again, because the economics have changed, like it's something that should be driven, and the ones that I know that like really do it and are great at it, it is driven by wanting to get things made. If you're a person like me, I just really get off on the idea of helping people that I think are creatively interesting or brilliant or worthy or smart or whatever it is. Like, I really love the idea of helping those people make their things. Like, that's a huge part of why I want to do it. And I also really love working on things that otherwise I feel like wouldn't get made unless there were some sort of force like pushing it through, right? if you want to get things made because you want to make your $4 million quote, or if you want to get things made because, you know, you like seeing your animated logo in front of things, whatever the case may be, like, I won't judge people's motives or intentions, but you have to be in this to like go through the slog of getting things made. And again, like when I was a film executive, nothing was easy to get greenlit. Like, I don't think I took anything to greenlight that didn't require some sort of, you know, Herculean effort, whether it was in the deal making and who's going to cut their fees so that we can get this to budget, or if it were, you know, like we can't cast this role and, you know, we've gone through all of our top picks and we're trying to figure out the availability of this person. Or when I was at Paramount, I worked on as a junior executive this movie Noah that Darren Aronofsky did, and there was literally a hurricane in New York in the middle of production. Like, it is not easy.
No,
it is not easy. And it's not like there's money, you know, kind of raining from the heavens for this effort. So it's really hard to get something made. And so you have to really have some sort of invested, you know, interest in doing it. Otherwise, it's just not worth it. So again, there's shitty people everywhere and there's bad producers for a host of reasons. But I think the idea that like any producer now is doing it because of the payday or for the glory, I just am like, who is that person who's getting that?
I don't know those people.
Of a single person
I don't know those people.
That lifestyle.
So why do you do it?
For me, it's just a belief in something. Like I was watching Vice McKay's new movie, and there's a scene where a young Dick Cheney asked Donald Rumsfeld, who's kind of like mentoring him in Congress, and he's like, okay, I get like we're doing this, we're doing that, but like, what do we believe in? And Rumsfeld, played by Steve Carell, just like starts hysterically laughing and like goes in the other room and he's like, oh my God, what do we believe in? And the scene was very funny and made me laugh. And I was like, I feel like I would have the opposite reaction. Like, I just have to believe in the thing that we're trying to get made. And for me, that belief comes from the people that are behind it. You know, if I can say I have like an innate ability in anything, is I'm incredibly good at getting shit done when I want to.
Amen.
And so when I have a person or a story or an idea that I believe in and that I connect to, like, I'm like, okay, I can do everything within my power to try to get this done.
Yeah.
I can't promise that it will, because as you pointed out, like in this industry, you know, you can will things into existence to a certain level, but no one person has the power to like make anything happen consistently. But I'll do everything within my power to try to get it made and try to get it made well into success. And I you know, what I've gotten back from working with and around the people that I worked with, it just is so like selfishly deeply, deeply rewarding to know that I was a part of getting that thing made.
Yeah.
Big or small, whatever it is, you know? And so for me, it's that simple. And I'm very fortunate that I've been able to almost exclusively work with people that I believe in, or I believe in the thing that they're trying to do. And then other than that, I'm just like, I'm a story nerd. Yeah. So, you know, I'm one of the, it's weird. Like I've been a year now into working
Outlier.
with Michael B. Jordan at Outlier. And we get a lot of questions repeatedly. And one of which is, you know, would you guys develop? And I guess that's something that only gets asked of a talent-based company, because Michael gets a lot of scripts that are ready to go or packages that are ready to go. And I was like, of course we develop. And not only of course we develop, but to me, that's the best part. You know, it's hard for me to work on things that I don't feel like I was inside of and helping shape and craft from early on. I'm the kind of person who, in addition to like wanting to help get the thing made, like I want to help a part of shaping it and building it into the thing that will be made. And that part of it is just being, you know, like an English major nerd who just really enjoys that part of the process.
I love it. Well, take me back a little bit to the beginning, just because I know like we got really into it and it's been 35 minutes and there was like a 10-minute soapbox I got on about social media. So take us back to the beginning a little bit, just so you were an intern at Lee Daniels' company. How did you get that internship?
So I was pretty sure by the time I went to college in New York, that I wanted to work in film at the time, just exclusively film, no TV. And so I set out like immediately to try to find internships, and I worked for PBS. I worked for these producers on a documentary called Slavery in the Making of America, which was great because that was super production heavy, but also I never had any sort of access to unscripted and doc work, and so that was just really educational. So I did that for a little bit, and then I was just like applying for, I mean, if you needed somebody to PA on your student film, I was like, I'll do that. And you know, any internship that I could find, I would apply for that. So I worked for Tribeca Film for a semester, less so on the festival and more so on the movies that they were making. I worked in Jane Rosenthal's office, and then I got the opportunity to intern with Lee. I think I like cold applied for it, and that was amazing because Lee was really like present, you know, was in the office, and at the time he was posting Shadow Boxer, which was the first movie that he had directed, and I was just really kind of impressed by his approach to directing a movie for the first time. And you know, both like, I don't know how many weeks they posted that film, but they were definitely working on it for a long time. But then also just getting like finishing funds, because he was doing everything independently and was like, you know, by any means necessary kind of filmmaking. And so screening the movie for all sorts of people to, you know, get money to finish it and take it to market. And I remember like his assistant left, or maybe was probably fired. And he didn't have an assistant over the summer. And I will forever be grateful for him for this, is he paid me to intern for him, which was amazing. And then he hired me to be his assistant, like his full-time assistant over the summer. So it was this great summer job. And you know, he was like developing what would become Precious, and was called, I think, Push at the time.
Yeah.
And developing all of this really cool stuff. And it was this office of like very brilliant people. And so it was one of the more kind of formative experiences I'd had. And then when I graduated from school, I was really not interested at all in moving to Los Angeles. I like think of myself, I was raised in Chicago, but originally from New York. And I'd always wanted to go back to New York, and thought of myself as a person who's like way more East Coast than I am West Coast. I had, again, you know, a lot of this is just like luck and fortune. And so I had the very good fortune of having a family friend who was a senior agent at CAA, and my mom's best friend insisted that I speak with him before I determined what I wanted to do. And he was pretty straightforward that if you want to do production and development, you need to be in LA. And he kind of walked through the path of development executive, which is not intuitive. Like, it's not at all what I thought it was, mainly because it starts by being an assistant. And I was like, why did I go to college and do all these internships to get an assistant job? Like, I don't understand how getting coffee for people is going to help me learn anything. And he was like, yeah, no, that's what you're going to do. So I moved to LA, as my brother says, with a suitcase and a dream. And I was, again, very lucky. I was kind of like, I always forget his last name, but the guy who did Body by Jake had been given an on-demand channel for exercising, like exclusively dedicated to exercising. So I worked as an assistant at Exercise TV. And then I worked as an assistant to these young kind of indie producers, but who both had, one of them was a former agent at WME. So she had, you know, like pretty significant connections. And she introduced me to, you know, a woman who is today one of my closest friends, and, you know, who I'm incredibly grateful for, because I definitely would not have a career or know anything were not for her hiring me. And she and this producer, Andrew Lazar, hired me to be their assistant at their company. It was based at Warner Brothers. Andrew had been producing for a really long time and was kind of in the like second wave of his career. And we made, I think, 4 or 5 movies in like 4 years. It was just a ton of experience. And what that job did for me that was so helpful was I had never entertained making anything for a movie studio or a big network or broadcast. I thought those people were kind of like the death of culture and didn't make anything good. And working inside of a company that was based at a studio, in a big studio like Warner Brothers, and that was also making movies for that company, I was like, oh, Alana, this is a business. Like, this is not just people making art for art's sake. And, you know, the vast majority of filmed content that is produced has to be commercially viable because it's made for commercial purposes. And it was just an education I didn't have because I was used to working with these like New York indie people, or like student filmmakers. And so it was a huge kind of mind opening experience. And it, at the end of it, I was like, okay, so if like 75% of film's content is financed by one of these companies, and those companies really hold the purse strings and the power in greenlighting what is made or not, like, I want to go work for them. Like, I want to work for the people that have the ability to say yes or no. And so I switched sides to go work for Fox and then Paramount as a studio executive, which again was a surprising experience because I really, really enjoyed the business part of the job. And I really enjoyed learning about taking, again, the creative out of it completely, why one thing should be made versus the other, what people define as commercial, how people use the word commercial and what they mean by that. What is a model that you run on, you know, the potential success or failures? And then I became like really interested in, at this time, again, I still only worked in film. I became really interested in the model of theatrical film production and distribution, and really kind of not critical, but what's the right way to put it? Analytical about how that model works and how it works well and what are the kind of inherent pitfalls of it. And then I was looking around and, you know, this like company Netflix all of a sudden was making original content. And I was like, what does that model look like? And then all of a sudden you could have a subscription to video on demand, which was wonderful, kind of full circle evolution of my start at Body by Jake's Exercise TV on demand channel. And then, you know, at that point we had like, there had been a recession, and I was curious about like how that affected trends in movie going audiences versus TV. And then at this point, like cable TV was becoming a thing. So there was all of this like dynamism in the business side of it, which was fascinating to me. And I really, really almost became more interested in that than I became in the creative. I would say not even almost, I definitely became more interested in that. And to end a long story, I really just shifted into like, again, I'd had these amazing experiences working with like real filmmakers, and the last 3 movies that I worked on at Paramount were Fences, Annihilation, and A Quiet Place, all of which were really driven by the filmmaker, all of which were really phenomenal scripts, and all of which had so much creative vibrancy and thoughtfulness behind them. And that was deeply rewarding. But I was really just obsessed with the business side of things. I went to go work for a startup it's kind of a startup, but Vimeo was trying to transition from a what's called the SaaS business, but basically just the service of being a video hosting platform for mostly professional creatives into a supplier and a distributor of original content. And that just really fed the part of me that likes to look at the macro business of this. And then I came out of that being like, okay, this is still very interesting to me, and I feel like I've learned a lot and I've absorbed a lot, but there's something here missing. And I realized that I am a person who, you know, you ask, why do you do this? Like, that belief part is really interesting. It's really important to me. And the creative part is really interesting to me. And so I started looking for things that felt like an intersection of the two, like allowing me to still participate in, you know, the business side of making content, and how do you design a model or play with models in this kind of dynamic world that we're living in, but also being able to pick and curate content that I believe in and that I believe should be put out into the world.
Yeah.
And so thankfully that opportunity manifested in Michael B. Jordan, who wanted to, turn what was his nascent production company into something that both made beautiful, elevated content, but also that, existed between the traditional space of feature films and television, which is what he had always done as an actor, and the kind of future space of him being a younger person, me being a younger person, knowing that people consume content in different ways. And so we're now a year into, building that version of the company, which he named Outlier Society. And we've made a bunch of stuff, and we're making a bunch of stuff moving forward, and it's been good.
Yeah, and his company is one of the first, at least that I have read about in the trades, to really take on the inclusion writer, which I think is brilliant and wonderful. So talk a little bit about what that is and how that has, shaped the culture there.
I love when we talk about the culture of our company because it's literally 3 people, but we're like,
hey, like start small.
It starts small. You got to start somewhere. But again, Michael is just really smart and really kind of connected to what's happening in the world, but also what's happening in the worlds of our business. And he was very moved by Frances McDormand's speech at the Oscars, where she name checked the inclusion writer. And then at the same time, he has his agent on one side and me on another, both of whom are directly involved with Stacey Smith's Annenberg Inclusion Initiative. Yep. We both sit on the advisory council. So when the inclusion writer kind of emerged in all of our consciousness, which I don't think any of us were aware. Well, it didn't exist, Stacey right. and 2 other women had kind of started to write it. So the year before last. And once we became aware of it, Michael was like, oh, well, this is completely aligned with my values and my beliefs. And it's a thing that I had been doing / would be doing anyway. And now here's an incredible tool to help facilitate that on a larger scale, and also to help both the studios and financiers and distributors that we're collaborating with, but also the producers that we're collaborating with and the filmmakers that we're collaborating with understand that it's important for us to strive for inclusion as much as possible for a host of reasons, mainly because it's the right thing to do.
Well, because it's like duh.
Yeah. Like, wouldn't you?
We shouldn't need a writer to begin with.
Shouldn't. But my whole thing on the writer is, this industry has existed for between 100 and 150 years, right? And it's had multiple iterations, and it's gone through all these evolutions. And the reality is, it has never been able to get this right. It's, it's analogous to America. Like, we still struggle with, in various different forms, whether it's Jim Crow, segregation laws, or mass incarceration, or police brutality, like whatever it is, this is a country that still struggles with issues related to identity and race, and we have not achieved true equality for all people. We're far from it. We've made amazing strides and progress forward, but we still have a long way to go. And so if it were easily fixable, it would have been fixed, right? And so I agree, but you get this, having worked on the physical side, people, for the exact right reason, work with the same people over and over again. And that's because to create the environment you were describing earlier, where things run as smoothly as possible and people work well together, and you feel like, you're building a crew in a way that should be successful. If you have a person you've worked with on 3-4 shows and they've been amazing, like, you're gonna want to call them again. Now, put that fact against the fact that the vast majority of people that have had inroads and opportunities in this industry have been white, straight, cis males. It's no shock that we're now 100, 150 years into this industry, and that the same types of people consistently work, or at the top of their fields, and then get to hire other people. And then psychologically, you add to that most people end up hiring, except for women, by the way, which is one of the ways in which we're dope, end up hiring people that they feel like they can directly identify with. And psychologically, most people end up hiring, this is not just true to our industry, this is in life, end up hiring people that look like them them or share similar backgrounds, right? So we do need it, unfortunately.
That was very well said, by the way. That was like, preach.
I think that there are people of all sorts of intentions, good, bad, and in between. I think, frankly, most people are lazy.
Yeah.
And I think most people think of themselves, particularly people in Hollywood, as good people
In
that
Hollywood.
are progressive
Themselves.
and that, well, exactly. But, they're like, oh my God, like, of course we think that women should direct. Of course we think that people of color should have more opportunities. Of course we think we should tell all sorts of stories. I think, frankly, most people think that way. I think the minority of people are probably sitting there saying, fuck those people, like we want to actively exclude them. Those people definitely exist, by the way. I've worked with some of them, but I don't think they're the majority. But it's like when you're trying to put together a show and you've got to manage all of the things that have to happen so a show can go, let alone go well. It's, I think, for a lot of people, viewed as an extra step to have to think about hiring differently, whatever that means.
And we're just going to have to pause right there. It's a very juicy conversation. Like I said, I would not steer you wrong. Tune in next week and hear part 2 of our conversation. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, rate, comment, like, do all of the things, as it really helps the show's visibility. And drop me a line. I'd love to hear what you think. What are you vibing with? What are your takeaways so far from the show? Are there any questions you wish I would ask future guests? Let me know. I'm at Carolina Groppa on all the socials, and the show is at Life with Kaka. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next week, beijos.